My wife told me she's pregnant, but I had a vasectomy 3 years ago. So I set up a hidden camera, and what I found destroyed our entire marriage. My wife walked into the kitchen glowing, waving a pregnancy test like she'd won the lottery. "We're having a baby," I smiled, said, "That's incredible," and thought, I got snipped 3 years ago, so somebody's about to have a very bad week. Instead of confronting her, I bought a nanny cam disguised as a phone charger and plugged it into the living room outlet. What I found on that footage ended a 9-year marriage in exactly 11 days. I'm Danny, 34. My wife Renee is 32. We got married 6 years ago, together for 9. Got the vasectomy right after our 5th anniversary. We'd talked about it for years. She said 2 kids were enough for her sanity. I said my sperm count could retire early. Went to the clinic myself, no pressure from her. Recovered on the couch for a weekend eating ice cream and watching westerns while she brought me ice packs like a nurse. Follow-up test 3 months later confirmed it. 0 count, officially and medically done. So when she came downstairs that Tuesday morning holding a first response stick with 2 pink lines, my brain didn't process joy. It processed math. Danny, look. She was shaking, actual tears in her eyes. "We're pregnant." I took the stick, looked at it, looked at her. "That's not possible," she blinked. "What do you mean not possible? It's positive. I mean, I had a vasectomy 3 years ago. You were literally in the recovery room with me." Her face did this thing. A half-second flicker, gone almost before I caught it. Then she recovered fast. "Those things fail sometimes. It happens. Like 1 in 2,000 or whatever." "Sure," I said. "Lightning strikes people too." She laughed nervously. "Are you seriously not happy right now?" I gave her the answer she wanted. Told her it was amazing news, that I needed a minute to process. Hugged her, said I loved her. Meant maybe half of it. The other half of me was already Googling vasectomy failure statistics on my phone in the bathroom with the door locked. For the record, vasectomy failure is real but rare, and it usually shows up early, within the first year, before the tract fully seals. 3 years post-op with a confirmed 0-count follow-up? Doctors I later spoke to called that essentially impossible. Not unlikely, impossible. I didn't say any of that to her yet. I just smiled and asked when her doctor's appointment was. Here's the thing about being calm on the outside while your marriage quietly catches fire. It buys you time. And time is exactly what I used. That weekend, I drove 40 minutes to an electronics store I don't normally shop at, paid cash, and bought a small camera built into a USB wall charger. Set it up in the living room outlet behind a stack of books, angled toward the couch and the front door. Told myself I was being paranoid. Told myself I'd probably find nothing but her folding laundry and texting her sister. I was wrong. 3 days in, I checked the footage on my lunch break in my car. Tuesday, 1:15 p.m., a man let himself in with a key. Not knocked, let himself in. Renee greeted him at the door in a robe. I won't describe the next 40 minutes because you can guess, and frankly, I fast-forwarded through most of it myself, hands shaking so hard I nearly dropped the phone. The man's face was clear enough. I didn't recognize him at first. Then, near the end of the footage, she called him by name. Marcus. Marcus. Her personal trainer. The guy she'd been seeing twice a week since January to work on core strength. I'd literally paid for the sessions on our joint card. I sat in that parking lot for probably 20 minutes, just staring at the steering wheel. Then I did what apparently every guy in this situation does. I called a lawyer. Her name was Patricia. I explained everything. The vasectomy, the pregnancy announcement, the camera, the time-stamped footage. She was quiet for a second, then said, "Okay, first, don't confront her yet. Second, get a paternity test lined up the second that baby's born, or sooner if she'll agree to a prenatal one. Third, start documenting your assets now, quietly, before she knows you know." I followed every word. I spent the next week being the most attentive, doting, excited husband imaginable. Bought her a onesie. Started a Pinterest board for nursery ideas, which felt like performance art at this point. Meanwhile, my lawyer filed for a non-invasive prenatal paternity test. Legal, done through a simple blood draw, no needles near the baby, nothing that could be framed as endangering the pregnancy. Just results. Renee resisted at first. Why would we need that? It's obviously yours. Big emphasis on obviously, like she was daring me to disagree. Babe, I had a vasectomy. My doctor's going to ask. I want paperwork saying everything's fine, so we're not fighting his office for 9 months. Reasonable. Practical. She couldn't really argue with practical. She agreed, reluctantly, and we did the blood draw 2 weeks later. While we waited on results, I kept collecting footage. Marcus came by 4 more times. Once he brought flowers. Once I heard him ask her, on camera, "Did you tell him yet? About us moving in once the baby's here?" Renee's answer, "Not yet. He's still weirdly happy about it. I think he actually believes it's his. I actually believes it's his." Sat with that line for a long time. Results came back on a Thursday. Patricia called me directly instead of emailing, which I already knew meant something. "Danny, 0% probability of paternity. It's not your child." I thanked her, hung up, and drove home to Renee with the printout in my jacket pocket. The way you'd carry a weapon you already knew you were going to use. She was in the kitchen making dinner, humming, hand resting on a stomach that wasn't showing yet, but that she'd already started touching like a prop. I set the folded paper on the counter next to the cutting board. "What's this?" "Paternity results. Came in today." Her face went the color of the cutting board. "Why would they be back already? I thought that took weeks." "It's been weeks, Renee. You've just been busy." I let that land. 0%. Not mine. She actually tried the "it must be a lab error" route first. Classic move. I let her run through it. Demanded a redraw. Accused the lab of incompetence. Cried about how invasive and cruel it was that I'd even ordered the test in the first place. Behind her back, like I was the villain of this story. Then I put my phone on the counter and hit play. Marcus, letting himself in with a key. Marcus, in our living room. Marcus's voice, clear as day. "Did you tell him yet? About us moving in once the baby's here?" The kitchen went dead silent except for something simmering on the stove that neither of us cared about anymore. "You had a camera in our house?" She finally said, like that was the crime here. "You had another man's key to our house," I said. "I think we're even." She tried anger next, called me controlling, said I'd violated her privacy, said this was entrapment in a marriage. I told her I'd let my lawyer explain the legal difference between entrapment and evidence in a divorce proceeding, since apparently she needed the refresher. "You're really going to throw away 9 years over one mistake?" "One mistake doesn't come with a key, a nickname, and moving plans," I said. "This wasn't a slip, Renee. This was a whole second life you were planning to fund with my house." She didn't have a comeback for that. Just stood there with her hands still on her stomach, like it still worked as leverage even now. I moved into a hotel that night. Papers were filed 3 days later. Update 1. 1 week in. Renee's opening move was the sympathy tour. Texts about how scared and alone she felt, how pregnancy hormones made her do stupid things, how Marcus had actually pressured her, how she'd wanted to end it for months but didn't know how. I didn't respond to any of it. Patricia's advice, screenshots only, 0 engagement. Her mother called me next. "You're really going to abandon a pregnant woman?" I explained, calmly, that I wasn't abandoning anyone. I simply wasn't the father, had documentation to prove it, and had footage of the actual father discussing moving into my house. Her mother went quiet for a solid 10 seconds before switching to, "Well, you two can still work through this as a family," which told me she already knew more than she was letting on. Marcus, for his part, texted me exactly once. "Bro, this is between me and Renee. You need to back off." I forwarded it straight to Patricia, who said, and I quote, "That's a gift. Keep it." Day 5. Renee showed up at my hotel, unannounced, mascara doing its best impression of a horror movie. "Please, Danny. I'll end it with him completely. I'll do whatever you want. I don't want to raise this baby alone. You won't be raising it alone, I said. Marcus will. That's kind of how paternity works. She actually said, but you were always so much more stable than him. Like stability was a subscription service she could keep paying into after cheating on the account holder. I closed the door. She sat in the hallway crying for a while. The front desk eventually asked her to leave. Update 2. 3 weeks in. Discovery got interesting fast. Turns out Marcus wasn't just her trainer. He'd been her trainer for 2 years, not the 6 months she'd claimed, and our gym membership records subpoenaed, because apparently that's a thing lawyers can just do, showed sessions scheduled suspiciously close to every single time I'd traveled for work. My lawyer built a timeline. It wasn't subtle once you saw it laid out. It looked less like an affair and more like a part-time job with benefits. Renee's lawyer tried to argue for spousal support anyway, framing me as emotionally negligent, working too much, driving her into another man's arms. My lawyer's response was one line. Mr. Danny had a documented, medically confirmed vasectomy 3 years prior to conception. There is no version of emotional negligence that explains that. The judge, reviewing the paperwork, actually asked Renee's attorney to clarify whether they were disputing the lab results. They weren't. They dropped the support request within the week. Renee tried one more angle, claiming the house was marital property regardless of the affair, since we'd bought it together during the marriage. True enough, legally. But I'd kept every renovation receipt for the addition I'd personally funded from an inheritance, kept separate the whole time per my accountant's advice years before any of this started. Not because I saw this coming, just because I'm annoyingly organized. Turned out to be the best paperwork habit of my life. We split proceeds, but not evenly, and definitely not in her favor. Marcus, meanwhile, apparently found out through the discovery process that Renee had told him I was basically already leaving her anyway, before any of this started. A story that, shockingly, wasn't true. He stopped returning her calls 2 weeks before the birth. Renee's sister let it slip to a mutual friend that Marcus had never actually planned on the moving-in thing, that it was something Renee had told me to make the betrayal sound more serious and permanent than it apparently was to him. Nothing like finding out you weren't even the thruple's endgame. Final update. The divorce finalized 4 months later. Clean split on the house sale. No spousal support. No claim on my retirement since the marriage assets were clearly documented, and the affair timeline made her case for equitable extra compensation collapse before it started. Cost me about $11,000 in legal fees. Worth every cent for the peace that came with it. The baby